Raul Ramirez of the Catch Wrestling Alliance, where we help you elevate your grappling and together we keep real wrestling alive. Thank you very much for showing up, for listening or watching. We're on YouTube, of course, and also Twitch. Just thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and get through the announcements though first. So next week we are back on at UCLA. They were on their spring break, so there were no classes, but we're back in action at UCLA. So if you're a student or if you have access to the John Wooden Center, so that's the name of their gym, named after the fantastic basketball coach who had a dynasty. I think they were 10 years national champions in basketball at UCLA. So anyway, if you have access, we're there starting Monday. But if you don't and you're in the LA area, feel free to come train with us at Fight Science MMA. We're there also, and you don't have to join the gym. You can just drop in and take our classes only if that's what you want. Say if you already have a gym you're training at. And actually at UCLA, in Los Angeles, there are a lot of people who are MMA fighters and stuff. So they kind of have their coach at one gym, and then their grappling coach at one gym, and then their striking coach at another gym. So I see that a lot. So feel free to come stop in. If you only want to do the catch wrestling classes, that's fine too. No one's going to pressure you to join Fight Science or anything like that. It's pretty chill and welcoming. So, and then also if you're on the East Coast, make the pilgrimage to South Carolina to train with Jon Strickland. Also, if you're not in either of those areas, you can, and if you want to learn, the Catch Wrestling Alliance Academy on our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com, is there for you. And then we also have one-off courses there too. So basically it's we have different subjects. So we've done a few pressure passing ones because that's one thing that people always ask about, pressure passing stuff. All on there. We have even some judo stuff, like no-gi judo, with one of my good friends and also a catch wrestling student, but happens to be a national champion judo, black belt, Juan Rodriguez. He's one of the big main guys over in one of our oldest judo schools in Los Angeles. He has a course up there. We have a bunch of different things up there. So if you want to just do one-offs, that's totally fine too. Or if you just want to support us, you can support us through our YouTube channel. It's kind of like Patreon, where you can become a member, and we have a bunch of extra videos up there that we always upload. Also, if you just want to support us, that's definitely the way to do it if you don't necessarily want to train. So there's that. Oh, and one last thing. So say if you have some kind of knowledge that you want to share with everyone and you want to put it up on a website or whatever, then one of the better places to do it is Kajabi. So we have it's basically an all-in-one platform where you can have you can teach your classes and do everything up there. And in the show notes, we have a link. You get a month free. So you can try it out. Feel free to ask me any questions too to help you out to get it set up. So there's that. So I think those are all the announcements, really. So if you have any questions, feel free to start asking. Totally fine. But kind of want to go over today what we were kind of something that we see evidence of all the time. So even the other day. And this is one of the old matches that we from one of the old Gotch tournaments that we did in Iowa. Someone commented about oh, shouldn't the ref put one guy on the ground or whatever. So basically someone was asking why there wasn't referee interference, right? Just how there is a lot of in freestyle and even folk style. The referee's always over everyone and basically stopping them or resetting them or stuff like that, and why they're not seeing that in catch wrestling matches, at least authentic catch wrestling matches that don't have points and have longer time limits. Then, um, so it's just there's well, it's going back to the root or like the main or the main focus of our episode today is like one of my good buddies, like how I mentioned him earlier, Jon Strickland on the East Coast, the other very authentic um, catch wrestling instructor, pretty much the most authentic you'll find in the Americas or in this hemisphere. So he wrote a little blog post. I kind of want to break it down as to like what you should kind of expect when watching an authentic catch wrestling match. All right. So one of the main things is that catch wrestling, since there was traditionally no time limits, you had a lot of like strategy based off of that, right? And a lot of techniques based off of that. And things have changed over the decades because the time limits of wrestling matches have dramatically decreased. So like in the Olympics, you have like 3 minute half 2 3 minute periods, right? And even in a lot of jujitsu matches, a lot of jujitsu tournaments, it's like 6 minutes continuous. So um, things will like change accordingly. So the way things are done, like especially for people who are competing, they'll adapt, right? So let's go ahead and have a listen to what John wrote. Okay, so a proper catch wrestling match back in the day between two equally skilled sized guys is going to be a more micro match than today's amateur styles. So let me back up. Parts of that match will be very micro, and to today's collegiate guys, it's going to look a lot more like stalling, right? So a lot of times it's going to be more of this trying to get like the wrist control or headlocks or stuff where you can try to incrementally gain control over the other person and simultaneously prevent them from just like taking you down, but also setting things up and also maybe even trying to put pressure on somebody to tire them out. We talked about it like maybe a year or two ago on our podcast where we were talking about the writings of Farmer Burns and where he was talking about like wearing someone out and like making them do reps. So like if you're able to get them down in referee's position and you can put like that downward pressure on their head to make them fight you just so that you can wear out their neck muscles. So there's different strategies for different things, and a lot of times you would want to tire someone out because you have like unlimited time. Uh, so all right, let's go to the next paragraph. Okay, the two combatants will determine the match overall than a ref or a rule book. It's more of a grappling on the mat in tight space match than on the feet. If a man locks hands on the bottom, it's going to be up to the other wrestler to change this, or if he doesn't like it. The takedown was only important back then if it led to submission or pin. In fact, it's very unlikely the match will be won on the feet. Rather, it's going to look more like jiu-jitsu on the mat than the very limited mat wrestling we see today. All right, so we just had the NCAA wrestling finals, so you could probably just like go on Instagram or something and see a lot of the highlights. There are a lot of really great like action-packed matches that you can see, a lot of the highlights. But a lot of times, like say if you were to look up the Madison Square Garden match between Joe Stecker and Earl Caddock, it's going to look a little bit different. And that was like one of the biggest matches like in history because it was in Madison Square Garden. It was like just super popular at that time, and you're not necessarily going to see the same type of action as what you'll see today because again, yeah, like we said earlier, it's like these are very short matches, so you got to just like keep moving. You also get penalized for stalling, but today are penalized for stalling today, but then back in the day, you really had to fight your way out of a bad position. The ref's not going to call stalling on the other person because they're holding you down. It's like you have to get out if you're being held down. So in this way, you can kind of see the more well-rounded nature of wrestling, or you can see, like, I don't know if well-rounded is the right way to kind of say it, but it's like you'll see the entirety of wrestling, right? Where you can effectively hold someone down, even another skilled wrestler, right? If you can get them down and keep them down, which is one of your, like, the main goals is, like, if you get someone down, you definitely want to keep them down. So you get to see more aspects of wrestling. Kind of the same thing where it's like, say, if you get a double wrist lock and you're holding on to someone and, like, they're fighting to get out and they're kind of stuck, they're kind of trapped. And if they complain, it's like if you're in a jiu-jitsu class and, like, they complain that, oh, all you're doing is just hanging on to that double wrist lock, and if they're not able to escape and not able to, like, submit you or, like, counter you somehow, then it's really, like, their problem. Like, they weren't able to get out, right? So with that being said, yeah, there's, like, one guy at 10th Planet headquarters where I train, one of the gyms that I train at. He wants to train with me because he wants to improve his counters to the double wrist lock, right? And he's actually, like, a really really experienced jiu-jitsu practitioner from Brazil. So I think that's kind of like the attitude. But I think if we see a lot of people who, like, complain, like I said, like, there's that comment about, like, oh, why doesn't the ref just put the person down and they'll start from there? It's like you see all the ways that people are kind of affected by the modern way of doing things, and they think that maybe that is wrestling. Like, when they watch amateur wrestling, oh, that is, like, the way it's always been, when it's not true. It wasn't always that way. All right, so let's get to the next paragraph here. So techniques were developed for the early moments, but also, if not more, the long game, meaning some moves will work better later in a match where the athletes are not near as fresh. Not only were there different techniques, but far more diverse strategies and philosophies. The rotary ride, deep waist, far ankle ride are now more quick, explosive breakdowns rather than rides. Hence the term rides in the old text, if you didn't have experience around some old timers to know this. In today's wrestling, having a side roll as your bottom go-to isn't strategically as wise as a stand-up. There's reasons for this. So kind of like what we're talking about, where it's like, you can, like, say, escaping. Wait, did you get a point? You get a point for escaping. You get a like, you say, if you stand up, right? If you're able to stand up and then maybe get a takedown, now it's 3 points. So there's all these different reasons why someone isn't necessarily going to wrestle, right? So it's not necessarily thinking like how nowadays in a lot of jiu-jitsu competitions they're talking about wrestling up, right? So it's like if you're on the ground and you find a way to get back to standing, you've wrestled up, right? But again, that's more of a modern way of thinking about standing back up. Whereas, like, in catch wrestling, if you're down and you want to counter them on the mat, where you both stay down, right? So in a way, you can kind of think of it as more of like a jiu-jitsu sweep, right? And so I think John's going to kind of talk about that later. And then the next paragraph he kind of mentions, like, yeah, if you're coaching in high school, you're going to talk about having kids stand up, or as opposed to doing real catch wrestling reversals, because it's like a points game, time game, more ref involvement. And then okay, so this is the point where we'll probably talk about it, where it kind of mentioned jiu-jitsu. Okay, in a long match, a wrestler is just more likely to be more upright than in a 2-minute period. Today, a lot of the grappling public is aware of catch wrestling or have at least heard its name. However, in most cases, I typically hear it looks like amateur wrestling with jiu-jitsu holds. Yes and no. A lot of the moves in amateur are certainly in catch wrestling, but how they were developed, executed, and the philosophy behind them are different. I can always tell a new guy who wrestled amateur. It's a much more spastic approach than a relaxed one. Again, there's great reasons they're philosophically different and yet similar. It's more static than amateur and less static than jiu-jitsu. Of course, this is based on my 16 years around Billy Wicks and 10 years talking with Dick Cardinal. I can only speak from my experience. And so, for those of you who don't know who Billy Wicks is, he was one of the uh, he did pro wrestling, of course, but he has direct lineage, tracing back all the way to Farmer Burns. So he has extensive real wrestling lineage and real wrestling experience. Even though to make money, of course, people did pro wrestling, right? So, but the other person that John mentioned was Dick Cardinal. Again, another great American wrestler. So again, like you'll get some, and it is weird. There's like a big world of reaction. So it's like I think ultimately a lot of people who don't know how to wrestle. Unfortunately, they're historians, right? So it seems like we get a lot of fanboys who are historians for catch wrestling, and they don't quite get the notion between like where someone could learn real wrestling, but then to pay the bills, then they would do professional wrestling that was like predetermined and whatnot. So I've seen some people who claim to be historians talk about like they were just pro wrestlers and they didn't know. But anyway, Billy Wicks really knew real wrestling, real catch wrestling, had that real catch wrestling philosophy, and he did a lot of the carnival matches. Where he would have to wrestle against a lot of amateurs, and so he would have to use a lot of the holds, like the double wrist lock. Same thing with Dick Cardinal. He has many stories about being like put in matches with very good amateur wrestlers, like collegiate guys in the United States. So he would have to use the catch wrestling, not necessarily the submission, but the idea of like all these wrestling counters and stuff. So, and then, yeah, definitely they would be pinned and also in a lot of pain because the way collegiate wrestling has evolved away from a lot of the kind of like the different wrestling holds that a lot of people don't realize are wrestling holds, but nowadays they call them submissions. They were very quickly being barred, right? And I think we did a post. I don't know if you checked out all of our social media. We kind of shared that pic from the collegiate rules book that Jon Strickland shared, showing about like how an illegal way to do a toe hold for collegiate wrestling. Not for pro, not for catch wrestling, but for collegiate. And then we did a video where it's like the wrestling rule book for the University of California back in the 1950s had the double wrist lock, but it was talking about how like it's very quickly, being like barred and being removed from a lot of wrestling matches because people getting injured from it, right? So even though they were thinking of it properly or as a wrestling hold, a way to control somebody, a way to maybe move them into a pinning position. But yeah, you get people who don't really understand these aspects, so they they don't understand like all the different ways these holds were used and how they were thought of a long time ago. All right, so that's pretty much the whole article. And so one of the things that kind of wanted to bring back was the idea how like some people do think it looks like amateur wrestling with some jiu-jitsu holds, right? So then John says yes and no. A lot of the moves in amateur are certainly in catch wrestling, but how they were developed, executed, and the philosophy behind them are different. All right, so like how John was saying, it's like you'll see Amateur wrestler being a little bit more spastic, right? So a lot of times they have to go like 100% if they get some move or if they think they grabbed a hold of you and they have to follow through or just fight out or stand back up. When it'd be more advantageous to roll someone over, both of you stay on the ground. It's like because there's points involved in amateur wrestling, not in catch wrestling, because there's time limits in amateur wrestling, not in catch wrestling. And unfortunately, so like speaking of jiu-jitsu and stuff, where it's like you have a lot of tournaments that have a short time limit, like 6 minutes, like how amateur does. But then you also have points, right? So then you have people doing things where it's like, getting a takedown and then laying on you, right, for the rest of the time. And then, like, what will happen over time is, you get a different version of jiu-jitsu that, like, so a lot of people call it like sport jiu-jitsu, especially the people who do a lot of the IBJJF tournaments. They will evolve into a way of doing things that fit the rules, right? That fit the short time limit. You gotta really be, trying to do something really quick and like to get those points, and then see if you can't get the submission or not or whatever. But I mean, that's going to be what, like, say, like the old timers in jiu-jitsu even talk about, like, oh, that's not the way it was done. Or you have like people like Rose Gracie who embraced like the submission only tournament and made the Gracie Nationals and Gracie Worlds tournaments that were submission only and stuff. So you get some responses, right, of people who want to kind of keep things in a more martial way, which when it comes to like no-gi and stuff, I would consider that to be more of like a submission only tournament. And so of course, like catch wrestling, pin or submission, no points, no time limit. That's keeping it more realistic, or more closer to the root, right? Closer to the authentic way of doing things, the way like the old timers would understand it. So that's kind of a lot of things to kind of think about when people are trying to look at catch wrestling, and if they come from a jiu-jitsu background or even an amateur wrestling background. I think a lot of times, like the amateur wrestling background people, like they can be even more confused, right? Because they think like, oh, this is stalling, or oh, why didn't the ref put the person down, or why didn't they stand them up, or why, it's like, no, in real wrestling, you have to, if you're underneath, you got to get out on your own. The ref's not going to save you. Like, unlike in freestyle wrestling, you're going to see that a lot where you only have 10 seconds, right? The parterre position, if you're down and you can like sprawl out and the person can't roll you over or whatever, they can't do anything, then you're going to get stood up, right? So you have these different like safety nets, right? But in authentic catch wrestling, you don't have those safety nets. Like, so if you're in a bad position, you have to find your own way out. The ref's job is like one of the easiest in catch wrestling, where they just have to look out for maybe like depending on the ring, right, making sure that they try to not fall out of the ring or fall out of the mat, or just safety, like stopping the match if someone gets pinned or submitted and stuff like that. It's like pretty easy, maybe pretty boring. I don't know if someone's like just like getting tired of watching, because some of these matches can last a long time. But you can see a lot of our Gotch Worlds tournaments. We had NCAA, professional referees, so you can kind of see them really counting pins, which is great. I think they did a fantastic job. See all of our matches on there. You can check because they got an eye for the pin, right? So ultimately, if you kind of keep the pin in mind, I think that will make your jiu-jitsu and amateur wrestling a little bit more dynamic. And I think that's kind of one of the things that is unfortunate, where it's like you'll get like in modern amateur wrestling and in modern jiu-jitsu, since you'll get so many people who are training according to the rules of the majority of tournaments, then that's why you'll get these people who are like these highlight reel machines who are doing things in a more creative way, who are maybe using some of the old techniques or some of the old catch wrestling techniques and stuff. Uh, and that's why they're doing so well, because they're not thinking inside the box, I guess. So um, let me see. So I'll try to think of an example. I mean, actually, I think I've said it many times where it's like you'll see a lot of the women in freestyle like be a little bit more creative than the men. You'll see maybe even was it Ray Higuchi, right? So he is a freestyle wrestler from Japan, doing very, very well and like getting single legs and not always just like, because a lot of times when people do a single leg, they'll lift the leg up so they're both standing. Ray gets it down. Like if he gets it, then he tries to really pull the person straight down, not lifting them up, not standing back up. Um, that's a little bit more catch wrestling like. Yeah, you'll see some people where it's like, yeah, there's a reason why they become standouts or they become highlight reel machines, because they're not doing things completely like in the standardized way of thinking about these sports, right? So yeah, there is room in amateur wrestling for a lot of catch wrestling techniques, even though it might lose you some points, right? You could maybe end up pinning the person, which is like the goal of wrestling. Or say like, I think I wanted to do another podcast or maybe in a video example of like, say the last West Coast trials of ADCC. You had I forgot his first name, but Pixley from Daisy Fresh. He just won trials, and he has an amateur wrestling background, and he's basically, I mean, he submitted a lot of people, but basically he got to those submissions by pinning the people, right? And one of the videos that Daisy Fresh put out today was you can hear the comment, it's like they're from their own footage, their own video footage, and you can hear the coach Heath Pedigo like saying like don't give them your legs, and kind of still keeping with the idea of doing like wrestling, using your hips, using your sprawl to keep someone from being able to reach your legs to go for a leg lock. I've said that I've said that to many people, not necessarily like on the podcast, but rolling and in training and all that. Like, you can use your legs to use your wrestling to keep someone off your legs. So you really won't have to deal with a lot of the people who are trying to leg lock you all the time. That you just won't give them their game. You won't allow them to do that, like to play their game. You can use your wrestling to counter a lot of that. You can use your pins. Pixley used a lot of guard passing. I saw some analysis talking about like Toriando. He tried to use a lot of that idea of something that those of you who are like really familiar with, especially even gi jiu-jitsu, they call it like that Toriando thing, where it's like someone's kind of giving you their feet. You can put a lot of pressure on the shins and stuff to kind of control the legs. We actually have one of our courses, one of our online courses, like one-offs, is all about that. I think it's a Pressure Pass Volume 2. Really a lot of that is based off of that, I believe. Yeah, Pressure Pass 1 is more off of the Fujiwara cradle, different things you can do from that kind of base, and then the second one would be a lot of the Toriando stuff. So it's stuff that's like you would see from a wrestling perspective, and it's very, very, it ended up being very effective. Pixley ended up getting a lot of submissions, but the matches where it went the whole distance and it went to the judge's decision, he still won because he was basically the guy on top. So there's all these different reasons why I say like wrestling is still good, but in my opinion, of course, as a catch wrestling channel, it'd be like catch wrestling is still better because it has a lot of these ideas and follow throughs like baked in. So, but congratulations to Pixley, because I've heard a lot about him because my time with Daisy Fresh, still really good friends with them here in Los Angeles. So heard a lot about Pixley, even though he's in the trains at the headquarters, not in Los Angeles, but you have a lot of his influence here in Los Angeles at the Daisy Fresh affiliate here. So went over a lot of his techniques and stuff, but yeah, still a little bit different. But I think it's kind of a good example. So I think I want to maybe do a video about that. All right, we got a question here from Frankie Cal. All right, let's see if we can put it up on the screen. All right, what is it called in catch wrestling when you go from one part of the body to the other, trying to submit the person? I'm not talking about chain wrestling. A lot of times, the thing about wrestling is like different regions will have different names for everything, but a lot of times it is like still all about like control and using pinning really, like pinning the hips or trying to get the shoulders or something, usually like the hips, keep them from moving. And then depending on how they react, they'll give you an arm or a leg, and say like if you're up against someone who's really skilled, you might not be able to get a finish from an arm or whatever you grab. Say you grab an arm first, they might be able to wiggle out. Then in their scramble, then maybe you can switch over to a leg. So a lot of times it's the whole dynamic, but it really it should start off with the pinning. The notion of pinning, right? Keeping body part down, make them struggle, especially like if you're doing jiu-jitsu where there's no pins, then you can then you'll pin them, right? And they'll be stuck there, and then they're gonna get tired of being stuck there, right? So then they're gonna like try to push back at you. A lot of times they'll give you an arm first. If you're more in north-south, you can switch to doing any arm submissions, at which it was kind of funny. There was one highlight, I think the second day of ADCC, the West Coast trials, that one guy that he just wears a t-shirt and shorts, he did the arm bar that I do a lot, the straight arm bar. So I did happen to see that, and it was pretty funny, because then the next day I went to 10th Planet headquarters, and one of the coaches there, he's like, Raul, the guy, did you see that guy did your move? And so yeah, it was a straight arm bar, but yeah, you a lot of times it's like you have to kind of make them react. So in a way, I guess a lot of times when we talk about chain wrestling, and a lot of times they refer to like the takedowns and stuff, where you try to take someone down and they counter and they're not taken down, then you got to switch to something else and something else. Kind of a similar idea, but when you've got them down, a lot of times you want to be thinking about pinning, and then going for like countering whatever they try to fight back with, right? So either their legs or their arms, right? Usually, right? Sometimes you can get a good neck crank or something, but a lot of times they're gonna be pushing at you with their arms, so they just give you like key locks, double wrist locks, all that. All right. Yeah. So yeah, ultimately a lot of people nowadays, like, they don't quite understand what's going on with catch wrestling, but it's very simple, and it should be like pretty easy for most people to understand, because maybe they'll know all these different rules for freestyle, which have tons of rules, right? Points and all that, point systems. But catch wrestling is very simple. Put them on there, put the blades on the mat at the same time, they're done, right? Especially so in our tournaments we have 2-second pins. If you make them quit or tap out, right, then that's the way you win also. So catch wrestling is very simple, but the ref's not going to save you, right? The ref's not going to stand you up. They're not going to change anything. The only thing they're going to try to make sure you don't do anything that's too dangerous. Like if you're going to fall out, like we had a match in a ring, right? So if you're getting close to falling out of the ring, they're gonna protect you. They're gonna stop you, stuff like that. So the ref's job in catch wrestling is a little bit different, and you can't like they basically won't be there. You're not going to rely on them to save you from a bad position, or if you touch the ropes or get out of the circle, stuff like that. No, they're not really going to save you in that way, like in modern amateur wrestling or in professional predetermined wrestling. It's not the same. It's different. So hopefully that kind of like gives you an idea of the differences. And thank you, Frankie, for your comment. So with that being said, again, next week UCLA, our classes start again. We're back from spring break. Also, if you're in LA, you can always train with us at Fight Science MMA. And you don't have to join the gym. If you want to train with us online, catchwrestlingalliance.com, CWA Academy. We also have a lot of one-off courses. And then we also have, you can become a member on our YouTube channel just to support us if you don't want to become a full-on student. And if you're on the East Coast, go ahead and train with Jon Strickland. And his article is linked down below in the show notes in the description box. So if you want to read it, actually, I should edit it a little bit because I left some. I should spell it because instead of jujitsu he puts JJ, right? So I should just write it out jujitsu. So I'll edit that. So I just noticed that right now when I was reading. There were some other things where, like, to make it more clear, I'll go ahead and try to clean that up a little bit. All right, so just thank you very much for your support. We're here to elevate your grappling. And then after that, together we're gonna keep real wrestling alive. Thank you very much. See you next time.